Greetings and salutations! This video is going to be about my new Audio-Technica LP5 turntable. For those of you who are used to seeing Linux content on this channel and you're wondering why is he doing a video about this, well, this is what we actually started out doing about 10 years ago, was videos about audio. And I talked about turntables and tape decks and amplifiers and all kinds of groovy stuff like that. I have had a lifelong fascination with sound. I spent about 20 years of my adult life working in radio as an engineer and an announcer and later on as a manager. So I have a lot of experience playing around with audio equipment. So that is why I was doing those videos about 10 years ago. And I was having a midlife crisis as well. I don't know, I went through this period where I was just getting a hold of old turntables and tape decks off of eBay and stuff like that, and I was rebuilding them and doing videos about them, and it was really kind of fun. Since then, I have gone through a whole lot of turntables, and even though this channel has sort of moved more toward talking about computers and Linux, every now and again I will post a video like this. Also, I have a Facebook page called JC's PhonoWorks. It's a group, and the folks in that group said, why don't you do a video about it? And I said, okay, I will. However, this isn't really a video. What this is a slideshow. And the reason why is because the only thing that I have that will record moving video right now is kind of a cheap Android phone. And the quality is it's really not that great. So I had to decide, do I do a slideshow and just sit and talk, or do I hold a cheap Android phone and point it at the turntable and talk then? This is a lot more comfortable for me. I can just sit around, got my notes in front of me, got all my numbers, all that stuff. I'm ready to rock and roll. So I hope you'll hang out with me and we'll just kind of talk about this turntable and talk about music and turntables in general. I do one of these videos about once every year and a half. That's what I'm averaging these days. So here we go. First of all, before I get into talking about the LP5, let me just talk a little bit about the turntable that I have been using. And this is actually the last video about a piece of audio equipment that I posted, was the UTurn Orbit. And the UTurn Orbit has turned out to be a really good turntable. I have enjoyed using it. It is a wonderful machine. For those of you who don't know anything about it, UTurn is a company that is based in Massachusetts, a very small company. They have about 15, 16 employees. And what they essentially do is custom build turntables for you. You go to their webpage. You can order a turntable with a pre-configuration, or you can kind of order it, add, a la carte, whatever you want on it. And then they ship it to you. And they do wonderful work there. They're pretty much handmade turntables. They're based on MDF. They have acrylic platters available, or an MTF platter. The plinth is MDF. And they use a pretty simple motor and belt-driven pulley system there as the drive system on the turntable. The reason why there's an extra motor sitting on top of my UTurn in this picture is because I have already blown through 2 of these motors. Unfortunately, they seem to have a defect that if you use them a lot, after a while they develop a tick. Now this tick doesn't get into the audio that you hear through the turntable, but it's quite annoying, and it does get worse over time. So I replaced one motor. The old one is sitting on the mat there, and then the replacement is now ticking as well. So I had to do something. I was either going to buy a new turntable or fix the Orbit. And of course the cheaper option would be to fix the Orbit, right? Because what would it cost? What do? I go out and spend a whole bunch of money on a turntable. And there's some other reasons why I bought the turntable as well. I just kind of wanted it because my listening habits have changed quite a bit since I first got the Orbit. I do a lot of listening to 7-inch 45s these days. And with the Orbit, you change the speed by manually moving the belt. And that gets to be a pain in the butt after a while if you're switching speeds back and forth. I have nothing but really good things to say about the Orbit, though. And one of the things I did up front when I bought the Orbit was I replaced the cartridge that came with it. I bought it with an Ortofon OM5E, which is an okay cartridge, and I still have it. But I put an Audio-Technica 95E on that cartridge, an AT95E, and on that turntable. I put that cartridge on it. Get it straight, okay. And I really liked the way that sounded. I have an affection for the Audio-Technica AT95E. It is not the most expensive cartridge in the world. As a matter of fact, it's relatively cheap. However, Audio-Technica has been making them for a long, long time, and they come as standard equipment on some pretty high-end Thorns turntables. If you have the right Tonearm and you get that thing set up right, that is one good-sounding cartridge. It sounds better than what you pay for it. Let's put it that way. So I was looking around at turntables, and I kept coming back to this one. And there were several things about it that I really liked. First of all, I wanted a direct drive turntable. I was tired of dealing with belt drive. I am an old school radio disc jockey. I am old enough to remember working on the radio, playing records live on the radio with rim drive and direct drive turntables. So that is how long I have been around. And I have always been somewhat suspicious of belt drive. I bought the Orbit, and it didn't prove to be that big of a problem. I mean, it performed beautifully. I have no issue with it. It seemed to be on speed, all that kind of stuff that people who are into direct drive worry about belt drives. It worked fine. As a matter of fact, the last two turntables I've had have been belt drive, and they have been okay. But I wanted a direct drive turntable. And then the next thing that I wanted was the AT95E. I knew I wanted to put that cartridge on it. Well, guess what? The LP5 from Audio-Technica comes with a custom AT95E. It's the AT95EX. And basically what they did was they took the AT95E and they threw some of the technology that they have come up with their latest VM series of cartridges. They replaced like the 120 and the 440 and all that stuff with now the VM5 series. It's VM510 through whatever it is. And they're really nice cartridges. I have my friend Phil out in San Francisco who used to have a YouTube channel called Hitstown USA. He took it down because the copyright police came after him so bad. But he had one of those cartridges. I was very impressed with it. I'm a big fan of Audio-Technica cartridges. So I was really curious about this cartridge anyway. The next thing that I found interesting was the J-type Tonearm. I remember working with radio station turntables where they would use like a Technics SP10 or a Technics SP25, and then you'd get those Audio-Technica arms, and they were really nice. And I'm a big sucker for the idea that the engineers at Audio-Technica kind of built a turntable around the cartridge and kind of built a cartridge around the turntable. That kind of unified design, just really, something I like. I also like the fact that it has leveling feet. So that was one thing I saw immediately and went, oh, I like that, because that's a lot of these turntables that you buy these days, especially the belt-driven ones that are on the, the plinth is a block of MDF. You can't level them, but this has leveling feet, so if I want to move it around, I can actually level the turntable properly. Comes with a really thick matte belt, what do you say? I don't know. Comes with a really thick rubber mat, which is another thing that I liked. And it's an aluminum platter, and that kind of causes some problems. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the video. So let's move forward and talk about what you get with the turntable. So this is some of the accessories I wanted to show you guys. First of all, you do get that big thick rubber mat, and yes, this picture is slightly blurry. I was having problems with the camera this morning, which is one of the reasons that we went for the slideshow thing. That's a nice big, that's like a 1/4-inch mat. Now I don't use that mat on this table. I actually have an old Pioneer PL518 mat that I'm using. And it's not because the Pioneer PL518 sounds better or it's a better mat. It's because it has a feature that is really useful to me these days. I'm playing a lot of 45s. I have been gotten very much intensely into collecting 7-inch 45 singles, not LPs. So the Pioneer mat has little cutouts. Makes it very easy to get a 45 often on the turntable. But it's the same thickness as the rubber mat, so it works out fine. You get a nice aluminum 45 adapter that is packed with the turntable, which is really nice. I'm not using that either. I'm using one that's stainless steel, but it's nice to have that come with it. And then over here we have a Protractor. and a quick setup guide, which is like solid gold to have shipped with a turntable. It's one of the things that I really like about the Audio-Technica LP5. They ship you everything that you need. Cables, software even, if you want to use the USB output on it. They send you a disk so you can install it on Windows or Mac if you want to. And no, there's no Linux software on there. Or actually, I haven't looked. There may be, but I doubt it. Let's put it that way. Let's not say things we don't know for sure, because it could be there. But it's Audacity, which in Linux is just, what is it? Apt install Audacity. Boom, there it is. No problem. So it's pretty cool. They send everything that you need with the turntable to get started. And the cables they send are really not bad at all. They're pretty heavy and they have a nice big ground in them. So that's pretty cool. But that protractor is really nice because that makes sure that you have the Tonearm setup with the cartridge right out of the box. And if you put a new cartridge on this turntable, using this protractor is quite easy. So this is the cartridge that comes with it. It's an AT95E. It also comes with this really nice lightweight new Audio-Technica head shell, which I like an awful lot. It reminds me somewhat of the old SME head shells that were popular way back in the 70s. Remember those? And real lightweight with the holes on top of it. So it's kind of that, and it comes ready to rock and roll. All you do is just take the cartridge out and pop it on there and then set it up, and they have the instructions on how to set the tracking force and use the protractor to double check it. Mine came aligned fine out of the box, no issues whatsoever. They must have a machine that does that, because you'll notice in this picture, if you look really close, and maybe the software will let me zoom in here, you see how the screw heads, they're like straight across. You see that? That's the way mine came as well. So they must have a machine when they're making these things to make sure that that's like perfect, which is awesome. And if I need to replace it, I have the protractor, so I will hang on to that. I really like that idea, that everything all at once, being there. A lot of the turntables that you spend a lot of money for these days, you don't get everything that you need. You don't get a 45 adapter. You don't get a protractor in the box, not even a little piece of cardboard on it, so you know how the tone arm that's equipped with the turntable should be aligned, that sort of thing. You don't get it. So this is the protractor itself, and it's kind of sort of bare-walled. It's not a bare-walled alignment exact, but it works for the arm. So I looked it up, and the bare-walled or Lofgren A, depending on which one you want to call it, the standard null points are 66.0 millimeters and 120.9 millimeters. And the ATJ arm here that comes with the LP5, it's going to, the null points are 66.2 and 122.4. So it's close to bare-walled. Close. They change it just a little bit is what they do. The arm itself has an effective length of 9.7 inches, which is about an inch longer than what I had on the Orbit, and it is a J-shaped arm. So as far as any mistracking issues or alignment problems that I could hear, I couldn't hear any at all. It just was like no big deal at all. It sounded very good to me. So taking a look at the back of the turntable, this is the connections that you have on it. So if we start over here on the, we'll go left to right, you have the RCAs, right and left, and then you have a built-in phono preamp in this turntable. So if you switch it to phono, you can plug it into a receiver or your own phono preamp, and if you switch it to line, then you're going to get a line level output and use the internal preamp. I have not spent any time listening to the internal preamp, but it seems to be very quiet, which is an improvement, because I remember that years ago I got an Audio-Technica LP120 turntable, and this has been many years ago now. And the built-in preamp that was in that turntable was simply horrible. I mean, it was really bad. It was so bad that it was so noisy that they had actually put a noise gate on there. So this little noise gate would kick in and turn it off so that you wouldn't hear any hiss when the needle wasn't on a record. And they did the same thing in the Pioneer PL990 turntable as well. And I just really think that's cheap. Why don't you put in a preamp that's quiet enough where it doesn't need to have a damn noise gate in it, gang? So it doesn't seem to be that kind of preamp. I haven't really played with it that much. It came across as sounding really quiet. What I did was I put it on phono, and I'm using the phono preamp that is in my stereo receiver. And we have a nice big ground lug there, and then we have a USB output. And the USB output works regardless of where you place this. So that is so you can plug it directly into a computer. And from what I have read, it is a 44.1 or 48 kilohertz sampling rate that comes out of there. I haven't played with it, so I don't know. Haven't played with that at all. So if somebody else has played with that, they can put their 2 cents in the comments. Over here is the power cord where it plugs in, the little IEC connector there, and then you have a power switch which is on the back of the turntable, and that would seem to be slightly inconvenient, but it actually makes it makes good engineering sense to put it there, simply because of the fact that means they don't have to run 110 volts in wires all through the cabinet of the turntable that could very well be picked up. So that's a good idea. And I guess you could just leave it powered up, but it's not that big a deal. You just reach around and you feel where the cord is, and it's easy to do by feel. And as I said earlier, they send you some pretty decent cables. They send you a really heavy, nice USB cable, quite long, and they send you some 3 or 4 foot audio, phono connecting cables with the spade lug on it as well for the ground. And that's the ones I used. I just took the ones out of the box and plugged them in. Sounded good to me. They were heavy duty and they looked good, so I just rolled with it. I do have some acoustic research cables that I was using with the UTurn Orbit, but I just used the what was in the box. I wanted to see what it really worked like. No problems at all. Very quiet, no hum, no hiss, very bright sound, very nice. So what else do we have here? The way you control the turntable is by using this knob on it, and you just select 33 or 45 and stop, and it actually has braking, so that when you go from 33 to stop or 45 to stop, the turntable stops almost immediately. And that comes from the fact that the drive mechanism that's in this turntable is really designed to be like in a DJ turntable. But the folks at Audio-Technica decided that they weren't going to have a stop-start button or a pitch slider or anything. Very minimal design on this, but it works the same way, gang. So if you actually wanted to like back cue records and play them on demand, you could use the knob just like you would use the start-stop button on a Technics SL1200 or any other DJ-style turntable. Works exactly the same way. As far as the speeds are concerned, while I was listening to it, turntable sounds great to me. Sounds like it's dead on speed. I noticed absolutely no any kind of flutter or jitter or cogging that I could hear. And I'm coming from having 2 belt drive turntables before this one, so I didn't hear anything like that. And I was really quite impressed with how smooth it was. The arm itself, that all of that can contribute to the sound. You can have resonance in the arm, you can have a little bit of jitter in the drive mechanism, and it seems to me that all in all, this is a really good sounding turntable, and not bad for the price. And talk more about the price at the end of the video here. Let's see, what's my next slide? Let's talk a little bit about setting up the Tonearm. This is a pretty classic way of doing it. It comes with a counterweight. You put the counterweight on. You can then float the arm, which means to make it level. So it's floating in the air level. And then once you do that, you just use that dial to kind of, you set the dial that's on the front there with the numbers on it. You set that to 0. And then you dial up whatever tracking force you want for your cartridge. All AT95E cartridges pretty much track at 2 grams, so mine is set to 2 grams. And the only one that doesn't is the AT95C, which is a custom cartridge that you can get through LP Gear in the United States. Has a conical stylus on it, and it tracks a little bit heavier. It tracks really nice at 2.5 grams. That's what's actually on my UTurn Orbit, and I may swap the styli on those to take the EX stylus off and put on the conical stylus and see what that sounds like. But right now I'm just going to leave it alone, let it get broke in. I like the way it sounds. Anti-skate you set with that little dial that is on the lower right hand corner of your screen. Some people out there, they're saying they have problems with anti-skate, and that is because what they're doing is they're taking a blank record and they're putting it on the turntable, and they put the tone arm down on it, and this anti-skate doesn't give them enough range to dial that up where that tone arm doesn't move in either direction. The truth of the matter is, if you set a tone arm anti-skate up that way, where you dial it up until the arm just doesn't move on a blank section of record with no grooves on it, you probably have too much anti-skate. So I am going to defer to the Audio-Technica engineers, and I just set mine at 2. I'm not real fussy about anti-skate anyway. I just go by whatever the manufacturer says, and I set it up. It's something that's extremely hard to measure, and it is a setting that, a lot of old turntables just simply don't have any anti-skate at all. None whatsoever. But it can help to balance the channels, and it minimizes wear on the records. There's a lot into that. You can go read about anti-skate if you want to. But I'm not going to set mine up to the point where the tone arm just sits still on a record when it's a blank record, because that's not telling you about what's happening in the groove or the friction, that sort of thing. You can go read about that to your heart's content. You can have fun in the comments about that. I don't really care. You know what I mean? It's okay by me. You can say whatever you want about that. This seems to work fine. There is some anti-skate happening. It seems to be enough. I am certainly not hearing anything funky like extra distortion over in the left or right channels, which would tell you that the anti-skate was either too much or too little. Sounds good to me. Of course, I have to do some more listening to this turntable before I draw my conclusions, but right now I'm leaving it at the factory setting. The bearings in the tone arm are a bit loose. Most mass-produced turntables like this, when you get them, like a lot of the Pioneers and the ATs, and they're shipped with the bearings just a tad loose. It is not so loose that I feel like, I need to fix it. There is no bearing chatter, and of course that could change with temperature and time, so I'm going to leave that completely alone. I do not have a bearing adjustment tool at this point in my life, and I am not going to mess with it. As long as it's working, it sounds good. If they loosen up later, then I may try and get them adjusted or do it myself. I don't have any shops around here that can do that, so I would have to get the tool and do it myself, but I'm not afraid of adjusting bearings. I'm just letting you know they might be just a tad loose when you get the turntable. Doesn't affect the sound, though. Sounds really nice. And let's see. And this is the turntable setup, and it has a record on it, and we are playing back a 45. And you will notice that my mat here is the Pioneer mat, which is about the same thickness. It's a little bit less diameter than the one that comes with the turntable, and I prefer rubber mats, by the way. I had a cork mat on the Orbit when I was showing you that picture. I like cork too, but I really prefer rubber. And this is my favorite mat. This is the one that came with the Pioneer PL518 and several of the turntables in that series. So you see here that there's this little, you can see the mouse pointer, there's this little dip in the mat. It makes it so nice to take 45s off and on the turntable. And then I'm using my stainless steel 45 adapter in the middle, which is quite heavy. It's about 2.5 ounces. I could very easily use the one that came with it, but if you, gang, the plastic ones that ship with some turntables or that you can buy, they're usually too small. So what happens is when you're playing your 45s, you may notice that you get a lot of wow in it, sound, and that's because it's not centered properly, and that makes a big difference. Now, some 45s and LPs even are pressed where they're not centered properly. And in that case, it is what it is. just kind of have to deal with it. But if you have a really good metal 45 adapter in the middle, and it has a nice snug fit with the spindle and a snug fit with the record, then that will minimize that. And back in my radio days, that's all we had was the metal ones. We used metal ones, the ones that came with the Technics turntables. And then if you had like a QRK or a Rusco, they had a built-in adapter. The 45s would fall into a little well, and the Gates turntables too. So there you go, 45 adapters. More than you ever wanted to know about them. I use a metal one. Also, you'll see I have a nice little stylus brush from Audio-Technica that did not come with the turntable. That's mine. I've had it. And under there I have one of the Audio Quest carbon fiber brushes that I use for LPs and 45s to get the dust off of them when I start to play them. And so far, I really like the turntable. There is one thing about it that's a little bit distressing. Now, my setup is stuffed in a corner, and the speakers are sitting on milk crates about 8 inches away from the turntable, and that entire corner, of course, is going to be resonant because of that. And it's not the ideal way to set up your stereo system. I know that. And because of the fact that the plinth on this turntable is made out of plastic, and you also have this really big acrylic lid, those act as resonators. So they can pick up vibrations from the sound and footfalls, and you will hear them vibrate in the turntable. Instead of just being a thump, you get a boom. Also, that is an aluminum platter, and that aluminum platter rings like a bell. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you need to have the heavy rubber mat on it. I wouldn't use this with a lightweight felt mat or anything like that, because you would probably start picking up resonance from that. So the turntable is quite lively in that regard. And for really the highest quality, if you're going to be using this to dump audio out of it that you're going to be digitizing, I mean, that's the reason why you're getting a turntable with USB on it anyway, then I would suggest running it with the lid off, because that takes away that diaphragm action of the lid picking up sound out of the air. It's acting like a microphone, and so you can just take it off. If you're just casually listening and you don't have the volume up real loud, you probably won't care one way or the other. I can live with it. It's not a deal breaker, but it is something that I did notice, and I'm just going to kind of have to get used to that. And, you know, if I am going to be doing anything where I'm transferring audio out of it, then I will do that. I don't really need to have a turntable with a built-in preamp and a USB output. But I was I looked at everything in this price range. And this turntable sells for $450 roundabout in the United States. That's the price that I see on Amazon. It's like $449. Also at Best Buy and several other people that carry it. And for that price, a lot of the other turntables that I was looking at, like the Projects and whatnot, they were just really simple and basic and didn't come with a whole lot. And I just wanted something that was more of a system, and I wanted to have that USB output if I should ever need it. Because what if I get something that's every now and again I come across a record that I can't get a download of? For me, I kind of think that let me back up the truck here. I kind of think that when you try and digitize records, even if you're using really good digital equipment, you're doing high-res files and all that stuff, a lot of the magic gets lost. Now, that's entirely up to you. I bought my records to listen to records. If I'm going to be listening to digital music, then I'll just listen to an MP3. It doesn't matter to me. There is a third dimension that comes from listening to records compared to listening to digital music. And it's lost when you take the sound from a record and you put it into digital. I don't care how high the resolution is. That's just my ears. But it would be nice to have this ability in case somebody else wanted to hear some of the really weird records I have. Like I have the history of WRVA radio in Richmond, Virginia, which is on a record. So I'm probably going to dump that into the computer at some point in time so that I can share it with friends who are into radio history in my area. So, you know, Richmond, is pretty close to where we are, and WRVA is a famous radio station, and I have some friends that would probably want to hear that special, so I might want to put that in the computer as well. And as I collect records like 45s and different LPs, some of this stuff is never ever ever going to come out on CD. I have about 2 or 3 LPs that I can tell you for sure will never be issued on CD. I have a George Shearing album from 1968 that has a sentimental attachment that has been deleted from the Capitol catalog. It is not available. So I might want to dump some more out of that at some point and put it up. But anyway, that's my thoughts on the turntable. For playback convenience, this is a robust turntable. Seems to be very well built. The arm is well engineered. It sounds good. I've been spinning 45s and LPs on it since, I don't know, I got it yesterday morning, and I started playing with it about noon yesterday and just kept on chugging with it until early evening. So I probably played about 3 or 4 LPs and many 45s, and just with the standard setup, no tweaking, no messing around. I like it. It's a good turntable, and I think for the price that you get, you get everything you need right out of the box for the price, and the audio quality is really good, and I like this cartridge. I do like the AT95Es. I think it's a very good sounding cartridge. How does it sound compared to the stock AT95E? I think it's a lot wider. It's a lot cleaner. It's a little lower output. A stock AT95E is 4 millivolts, and this one is 3.5. So yeah, it's a little bit better than, or a little cleaner, let's put it that way. Lower output magnetic cartridges tend to be cleaner. And yes, I did bump the microphone, so you're probably hearing all kinds of weird noise. Best for the price, I think, in its class at this moment. And before we completely just get out of the whole thing here, let's take a look at some of the other Audio-Technica turntables. They have the LP7, which they're selling for like $700. That's way out of my price range. And then they have the LP5, and they have several DJ-based turntables, and then they have the turntables here that are kind of the cheapies. Now, the nice thing about Audio-Technica is that they build their own cartridges, and all the AT cartridges, even the really cheap ones, they tend to sound pretty good, and they're very kind to your records. So you could buy even the lower-end Audio-Technica turntables, and I would feel safe playing LPs on it. It's not going to tear up your LPs or anything like that. And it's kind of neat to see what they're doing in the market. AT is a name that's been around for a long, long time, and the LP5 is sort of like I think it's really their first attempt at going into a more refined market, and instead of like doing a DJ turntable with a lot of flash. And the build quality is better than what I had with the AT LP120 that I had several years ago. I hated that turntable. It was so frustrating to me that I actually threw it across the room. So glad to see that they have stepped it up quite a bit. So there you go. You can look at Audio-Technica and you look at their turntables and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I'm about done running my mouth, and I really appreciate the fact that you hung out with me and we got to talk about that. And of course, you can put your questions in the comments and I will talk to you there. So let's go back to here. There you go. Everything you wanted to know about the LP5 turntable. And I'm gone. Thanks, gang.